Let's now analyze the next layout called Flex Layout. This is a layout that can arrange controls horizontally and vertically in a stack, and can also grab its children if there are too many to fit in a single row or column. In addition, this layout can control orientation and alignment and adapt to different screen sizes. Let's see it in action. And for this I have created a new project called Flex Layout Demo, and I have created this content page called Flex Layout Page. I'm going to proceed to indicate that this is going to be the initial page. And once I've done that, I go back to the XAML code and we're going to proceed to remove this stack layout element and instead use a layout called Flex Layout as we did before. To see what the default behavior of this layout is, let's create a couple of buttons. Once I have created this pair of buttons, let's proceed to launch the application. Here we see the application running using Flex Layout. And we can see how the elements are stacked as if it were a stack layout. But we are using a Flex Layout that allows us to use some properties that a stack layout does not contain. Let's see what they are. We go back to the XAML file, and as part of the Flex Layout we have a property called direction, to which we can assign different values. For example, we can assign a value equal to column. With this, the elements are aligned as if they were a single column, that is, the elements are stacked in this way that we are seeing in the emulator. We have some additional values. For example, we can use column reverse, whose value returns to establish a column format, but this time the elements are stacked from the bottom to the top. The default value for the Flex Layout, as we saw earlier, is the row value. But we could also use row reverse, that aligns the elements in a row format, but this time aligning the elements from the right to the left. We're going to leave the value by default, and we're going to see another property that we can use that is called aligned items. This property is going to serve us to be able to modify how the different elements that are part of the Flex Layout are going to be distributed. We can use a value, for example, called stretch, which is the default behavior. We could also use a value equal to center, which positions the elements in the center of the Flex Layout. We could also use the value start and the value end. Let's see how this start value looks like. And this is how the elements look like when we use precisely this value. Let's look at a slightly more complex example. I'm going to change the code for one that I have created previously, which is this one that we see here. The layout that gives us this pasted code is what we are seeing on the screen, which is very similar to if we had a layout in HTML format. We have a header, we have a content section, a footer, and two different sidebars. Let's examine the source code so that you understand how this example is working. First, a Flex Layout element is defined. We are setting an address equal to column, that is, the content will be in a column. Next, we specify a label element. We assign a text, a font size, a background color, and a location for the text. This displays this section that we see at the top that has the text that says header. Then we specify a section that has this comment that says body. I'm going to proceed to remove it so that you can see how this second control behaves. This control that we see here represents the footer and is a label with different properties, which is very similar to the header section. If we save the changes, we see this layout, which is very similar to what we have seen in the first example, when we had created the pairs of buttons. The elements are simply being stacked. I'm going to go back to the code that we had previously. That is to say, I am returning this code that represents the part of the body. And as part of that section, we are creating another Flex Layout element, and we are using a property called grow, which has a value equal to 1. This grow property serves to indicate that we want to use all the available space between two elements, that is to say, between this element called header and this element called footer. If, for example, we wanted to remove this property grow equal to 1 and save the changes, see how the preview gives us a behavior similar to the one we had previously, because we are not indicating how much space we want the flex layout to occupy. Next, as part of this flex layout, we have this label element, and again we are using this flex layout property called grow equal to 1. That is, we want to use all the space that is available to place this label element. And before we see what this looks like, let's again indicate that we want to use the property called grow equals 1. And the flexLayout.grow assignment for the label element is indicating that we want to use all the available space. Next, we have some navigation elements, and we see a couple of additional properties. A flexLayout.basis property equal to 50, and the second property called flexLayout.order equal to -1. This first value allows us to indicate that we want a fixed number of units to be used. That is, we want this box view to have a specific width based on this property. If we were to change the value for a different value, for example 150, we see how effectively this first box view is bigger because we have modified this property. On the other hand, this property called order is going to allow us to decide which is the order inside the flex layout, and we can see it in a visual way. If we examine the content from top to bottom, we could think that this part of the content should be positioned first, then this pair of sidebars should be displayed, but in reality, when we saw the code execution, we see that a box view is placed first, then the label element, and finally the second box view. In fact, we can test it by removing this property, saving the changes, and as we have removed precisely the assignment of this value, in this first place appears this label element that has the text content. Then we have this pair of sidebars, which contain the values that we have previously specified. Let's return this value as it was, that is to say, let's indicate that we want the box view to have an order -1, since we want to position it as far to the left as we can. And then we're going to place this label element and finally this box view element, which we could also modify in case we need to change its location using flexLayout.order and assigning a different value.